Welcome to our Network Plus course. Networks are designed to allow users to have access to applications as well as data that is stored in remote locations. Networks also allow users to move data from one place to the next. An example of this would be if I wanted to send an email over the internet, I would have to send that email over a very large network so that it could be received on the other side. Networks can be as simple as two computers sharing information, or as complicated as infrastructure devices that change as the network environment changes. So let's take a look at some of the objectives that we'll be covering in our Network Plus course. We'll start out with the basics of networking. This will tell us a little bit about the hardware requirements that will be needed to make our network function properly, as well as what our network will look like after everything's put together. Network connectivity is the act of establishing a connection from one point to the next, and there are several different methods of this. Network connectivity also involves users telling each other apart, such as computer names or computer identification numbers. When we're moving data from one platform to the next or from one computer to the next, we have to have a standard in which this is done. Otherwise, only one type of computer would be able to communicate. The OSI model establishes this standard for us. It has 7 layers that describe how data moves from an application down to the network wire and back up to the application on the other side. The wire that data is moving on is called network media. Network media comes in several forms, and we'll cover each of the different forms and even the connectors that those different network medias will use to connect to our network devices. When people communicate, they communicate using a standard language, such as the English language. Well, networks have the same requirement. Networks have to have protocols. Protocols have to be the same for two computers in order for those two computers to talk. So we'll cover different network protocols, how we get those protocols, and what each individual protocol will be used for. Next, we'll move into TCP/IP. TCP/IP is an example of a network protocol. This particular protocol is special because it's the protocol used on the internet. It's also a very common protocol to see in local networks, such as the network in your home or in your office. TCP/IP has very many components to it. So we'll cover all of those components and talk about some of the services that TCP/IP, or Transmission Control Protocol, and Internet Protocol can provide to us. Next, we'll talk about network appliances. Network appliances control the mode or the method in which data moves across our network. Network appliances can be very simple, like hubs, for example, that just forward traffic, or can be very complicated, like proxy servers that can actually evaluate the contents of the traffic and make decisions based on that. One of the large obstacles that we face in networking is getting data to users that can't be tied down to a desk. Well, we can solve that with a wireless network. So we'll cover some of the different hardware requirements, some of the concepts, and even the configuration requirements to establish a good wireless network. I mentioned the email example, so let's talk about that for a minute. Unfortunately, we can't just all be on the same network together. So we have what's called a wide area network, also known as the internet. With these very large networks, we have to have special methods in moving data from point A to point B. So we'll talk about the different wide area network technologies, when they're used, and what hardware requirements there are for those. Oftentimes, you'll find it's not always as simple as walking up to a computer to perform management functions. So we have remote access capabilities. In this chapter, we'll cover some of the protocols that are used for remote access and even talk about how you would establish those and some of the configuration methods that you can use with remote access technology.